I wasn't planning to buy a used laptop. Not really. But when my old machine finally gave out, screen cracked, fans screaming like a jet engine, battery bloated. I had to act fast. Money was tight, and Craigslist had a listing that seemed too good to ignore. Lightly used laptop, great condition, $150. Must pick up, no delivery. The post had no photo, just a short, vague description and a phone number. I hesitated for a second. No images, no specs. But something about the message felt urgent. Or maybe it was just my desperation talking. I texted the number, expecting silence or a scammer. Instead, I got an immediate reply. You can come tonight, cash only. Address is 3221 Mercer Street. Text before you arrive. The speed made me nervous, but I didn't question it. I needed a machine for work and fast. That was my logic. That's how I justified driving across town to a part of the city I hadn't visited in years, where the streetlights flickered like they couldn't quite commit to being helpful. When I pulled up, the house looked abandoned. Not decrepit, not broken down, just empty. The kind of emptiness that feels hollow, like someone left in a hurry and forgot to take their presents with them. There were no lights on inside, just a porch lamp casting a cone of dull yellow over the cracked concrete steps. I double-checked the address. This was the place, and I texted, "I'm here?" No response. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Still nothing. I was about to leave when the porch light flickered once, then stayed steady. My phone buzzed. It's on the bench, envelope inside. That was it. No name, no thanks. A wooden bench sat against the side of the porch. Sure enough, a laptop case rested on it. Zipped, black, nondescript. I picked it up. It was heavier than I expected. Inside was a slim HP, surprisingly clean, and an envelope, like they said. It had $150 written in thick black marker across the front. No note, no receipt, no instructions. I put the money in, left the envelope, and walked back to my car. I kept looking over my shoulder. At home, I opened it up. It booted quickly. No password screen, no user account. Just the default Windows desktop and the recycle bin sitting lonely in the corner. It felt scrubbed, like someone had tried to make it look untouched, but not carefully. There was still a faint outline of a custom wallpaper behind the default one, and a new folder too, deep in the Documents folder. I clicked on it. Empty. But the history, the browser history, hadn't been cleared. And that's when I saw it. A series of searches that weren't random or technical, but deeply personal. How to dispose of something without getting caught. Body won't sync. What to do. How to wipe a laptop clean without forensic trace. And then, most chilling of all, I didn't mean to. I swear. I stared at the screen, heart racing. My reflection in the black frame of the laptop looked pale and unsteady. I felt like I had just opened a door that someone had locked on purpose, and I wasn't sure I could close it again. I couldn't sleep that night. The laptop sat on my desk like a sealed box I'd already opened, the consequences leaking out slowly, hour by hour. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. People search weird things all the time, but I couldn't let it go. Those queries weren't idle curiosity. They were part of a story, and that story felt unfinished. So I dug deeper. I installed a recovery tool, one I'd used before when I accidentally deleted a work file. It's not exactly legal, depending on how you use it, but I wasn't planning on anything criminal, just curious. The tool ran through the laptop's SSD like a detective with a flashlight. I didn't expect to find much, but after an hour, it recovered fragments of old files, mostly garbage, thumbnails, corrupted PDFs, bits of broken code, until I saw a document with a single name, Hannah. Just that, a docs file titled Hannah. I opened it. It wasn't long, just 3 paragraphs, no date, no formatting, just raw text that felt like a confession written during a breakdown. She said she was leaving, that she'd told her sister everything. I told her to stop talking, to calm down, but she kept yelling. I didn't mean to hurt her. She just fell. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I thought if I got rid of the phone, the messages, the laptop, maybe it would just go away. There was no signature, no name of the author, but it felt real, too real. I Googled Hannah and our city name, just to check, just to see. I told myself I wasn't looking for anything in particular, but I found something. An article from almost a year ago. Woman missing. Name, Hannah R. Last seen leaving work downtown. No leads. Family pleading for answers. The story had faded out of the headlines months ago, and it was clear no one had ever found her. I stared at her photo. She was maybe in her early 30s. Dark hair, kind smile. I checked the laptop's previous owners again, but there wasn't much to go on. The Craigslist number was a burner, already disconnected. The user account was generic, and the laptop's system registry had been wiped. Whoever sold it to me didn't want to be found, and yet they left this behind. I should have gone to the police, I know that, but I didn't. Not right away. Instead, I told myself it was none of my business, that maybe it was just a writing sample, a piece of fiction. People write strange things all the time, right? But as I closed the file, something clicked in the background. The laptop's fan spinning up again, briefly, and I noticed a strange folder appear on the desktop, just for a second. Then it vanished. I wasn't imagining it. I checked the system processes. There was something running silently, hidden. A remote access tool. Someone was watching. I yanked the power cord, shut the laptop, and stood up so fast I knocked the chair back. My skin was cold. My heart pounded. I had touched something I wasn't supposed to find, and now it was touching back. I didn't sleep at all that night. I stayed on the couch, the laptop shut, and placed on the far end of the coffee table like it was some cursed object I had accidentally brought into my home, a Trojan horse with a glowing screen and secrets buried so deep that even the machine itself seemed afraid of what it carried. My heart kept racing, my mind replaying that short file over and over. The panicked tone, the disjointed phrasing, the rawness of it, like someone had written it in a single burst, either out of guilt, terror, or something far darker. And now this laptop, sold to me for $100 in a strip mall parking lot, was whispering pieces of a story I couldn't walk away from. When morning came, I made coffee with shaking hands, the bitter heat grounding me just enough to sit back down and open the laptop again. This time offline, Wi-Fi disconnected, webcam taped over, microphone settings buried in the OS menu. I didn't want eyes on me. I didn't want ears. I wanted distance. But I also wanted answers. So I opened the system logs, digging through layers of hidden directories, the kind you don't find unless you know where to look, the kind used by people who don't want to be followed. There were traces of remote access going back weeks, maybe months. Someone had used this laptop to connect, control, hide. Whoever they were meticulous, but not perfect. Buried deep, I found what looked like encrypted photo files, dozens of them, all named with long, random strings of numbers and letters. It took hours and a cracked recovery tool to unlock just one of them. What I saw made my stomach drop. A grainy image, a basement, judging by the exposed pipes and concrete walls, and in the center, a woman. sitting on a folding chair, her wrists bound with duct tape, eyes red from crying. The image had no timestamp, no metadata, but it looked real, too real. I shut the laptop and sat there, breathing hard, the sound of the fridge humming in the background like a distant siren. What the hell had I found? I went to the police website, hovered over the Submit a Tip form, then closed the tab. I couldn't prove anything. I had a file with no context, a photo that could be fake, a ghost in a hard drive. And yet, I felt something tighten in my chest. A duty, guilt, fear, all of it. I left the apartment just to get fresh air, to feel real life again, the sun, the wind, people talking about groceries and weekend plans. But even in the bright day, the feeling followed me like a shadow that wouldn't shrink. That night, unable to shake it, I went back to the search history. That's when I saw it. Buried between technical forums, junk links, and obsessive searches about how to erase SSD data, there was one that made my skin crawl. How long does a body stay preserved in a basement? I stared at it, reread it, then pushed back from the table like the words might catch fire. This wasn't just a leftover device, it was a breadcrumb trail. And if I had found it, then maybe it was left for someone to find. Or maybe I wasn't supposed to. I returned to the Craigslist page where I'd found the laptop, but the listing was long gone. I tried to recover the email used for the transaction, and that's when I saw something that had slipped past me before. The seller's name was a string of nonsense, except the initials matched something I'd seen in the file metadata. RD. I didn't know who RD was, but I was starting to think they weren't done with this story. And now, somehow, I was a part of it. The next day, I called in sick, faking a cough, apologizing to my boss with the usual overused excuse about stomach flu, because I knew there was no way I could sit in an office, pretend to write code, and ignore the weight of what I had found festering in that laptop's memory, bleeding into my mind like a slow poison. I spent the morning hunched over my kitchen table with the blinds drawn and a stale cup of coffee in hand, combing through every file, every trace, every breadcrumb I could scrape from the fragmented digital corpse someone had tried to bury. It wasn't just the photos or the bizarre browser history that gnawed at me. It was the patterns. The same locations kept popping up, addresses embedded in metadata, GPS pings from old Wi-Fi logs, half-saved delivery forms. And when I mapped them out, they formed a crude triangle across town, anchored by 3 places, and now abandoned gas station on the industrial edge of the city, a suburban house with a listing that showed it had sold as is 3 months ago, and a third location, a storage unit facility on the outskirts, barely lit and open 24/7. I wasn't a detective, I wasn't brave, but I was obsessed. And obsession, I've learned, is louder than fear. I packed a small backpack, flashlight, gloves, a burner phone I'd bought months ago and never activated, and a printed copy of the HANA file. And I drove, first to the gas station. It was exactly what I expected. Closed, boarded up, the inside gutted and covered in graffiti, the parking lot cracked and overgrown with weeds, like nature had already started reclaiming it. But what caught my attention wasn't the building. It was a trash can around the back, rusted and forgotten, where someone had once burned something. Inside were the charred edges of old photographs, mostly destroyed. But one still had a sliver of a woman's face, half melted. And behind her, that same concrete basement wall I'd seen in the photo. Next was the house. It looked normal from the outside. Beige siding, cracked steps, overgrown lawn. The kind of place you'd drive past and never think twice about. But through the front window, I could see the outline of boxes, still unpacked, and no curtains. I parked down the street and walked past it twice, pretending to be lost, pretending to talk on the phone. On the second pass, I noticed a sticker on the window. ADT Home Security, protected by RD. That name again. I snapped a photo. My hands were shaking. Finally, the storage units. It was past sunset by the time I arrived, the facility glowing under harsh halogen lights that buzzed like insects in your ear, casting long shadows across the rows of metal doors. I didn't have a code. I didn't have a unit number, but I did have curiosity and bolt cutters, which I wasn't proud of, but had convinced myself were necessary. I wandered for a while, pretending to look for my unit, until I found one that matched an address in one of the encrypted documents. Unit 117. The lock was cheap. Inside, it was empty, at first. Just a metal box with dust on the floor and the smell of oil and rust. But when I stepped in and let the door creak shut behind me, I saw the trapdoor in the floor. It wasn't hidden, just ignored. I didn't open it. Not yet. My heart was slamming against my ribs, and my palms were slick with sweat. I stood there for a long time, listening. Not to sound, but to silence. The kind of silence that feels wrong. Eventually, I left. I told myself I needed time, needed to think. But really, I was scared. And as I drove away, headlights off, watching the rearview mirror more than the road ahead, I realized something terrifying. If I could find all this with just a laptop and a weekend, then maybe this person, RD, whoever they were, had wanted someone to find it. Or worse, maybe they had left it specifically for me. I don't remember driving back. Not really. Not in any way that feels linear or clear. Just fragments. My hands white-knuckling the steering wheel. The blinking lights of the dashboard melting into the blur of the highway. And the growing realization that sleep wasn't going to come. Not until I knew what was beneath that rusted door in Unit 117. I tried to convince myself to wait, to bring someone else, to call the cops and let them deal with it. But that meant explaining everything. The laptop, the files, the photos, the lies I'd told. And somewhere in the chaos of my obsession, I'd crossed the line between witness and participant, and I didn't know if I could go back. So at 3:11 a.m., I parked in the same dark lot behind the storage facility, wearing gloves and boots this time, flashlight tucked in my jacket, and my stomach twisted into a knot so tight I could barely breathe. I approached Unit 117 like it was a living thing, like it might wake up if I stepped wrong. The lock I had cut earlier was still hanging, useless, the door slightly ajar from my last visit, creaking as I pulled it open. Inside, nothing had changed. Same metallic chill, same silence that felt thick enough to choke on. I stepped over the threshold, let the door click shut behind me, and stood for a moment in total darkness before switching on my flashlight. The trapdoor was still there, rectangular, iron, bolted down with just 2 screws now, old, rusted, ready to give with the right pressure. I dropped to my knees and unscrewed them one by one, each turn echoing like a gunshot in the silence. My hands shook so badly, I nearly dropped the screwdriver. When I finally lifted the panel, the hinges groaned like something waking up after years of sleep. Beneath was a wooden staircase, steep, narrow, and damp with the kind of cold that feels ancient. I hesitated only a second before stepping down, the light from my flashlight flickering with every breath I took. The further I descended, the more I realized this wasn't a basement. It was a tunnel, long and man-made, reinforced with old timber and lined with shelves, like some forgotten bunker. And on those shelves were things that made no sense. Children's toys, Polaroid cameras, rusted scissors, stained journals, plastic bags full of hair, a row of old flip phones with dead batteries and cracked screens. Some items had names scrawled on masking tape stuck to them. One read Jenna 031217, another CL found 0821. I felt like I was seeing the inside of a disturbed mind, not a collection, not trophies, but evidence, or maybe a confession, just like the search history. At the far end of the tunnel was a table, crude and low, and beside it, a metal chair, bolted to the concrete floor. Leather restraints dangled from the arms like dead snakes. I froze, because above that chair, nailed directly into the wood, was a photo. Not of Hannah this time, but of me. It wasn't a selfie. It wasn't something I remembered being taken. It was me walking down the street outside my apartment, wearing the same jacket I had on right now, carrying the same bag I'd taken to the storage unit. It had been taken recently. I staggered back, hitting the wall, and in that moment, I heard something. A noise I hadn't noticed before. A steady dripping. Water? Blood? No. It was a leak from a cracked pipe overhead, but I didn't care. I was done. I turned and ran, up the stairs, out into the unit, through the corridor, not even bothering to close the trapdoor behind me. I stumbled into my car, locked the doors, and sat there, shaking, as the realization hit me like ice down my spine. Someone had been watching me, not just in the past, but now. Right now. And then I saw it. On the passenger seat was an envelope. I hadn't put it there. I didn't open it. Not then. I drove straight to a motel on the other side of town, paid cash, locked the door, and sat with the envelope in my lap for almost an hour before I finally tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, unsigned. Curiosity is a dangerous addiction. Now you're part of it. Let's see how deep you go. There was also a USB drive, and I knew, before I even plugged it in, that I wasn't done. I waited until sunrise. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I sat in the middle of that motel room with the USB drive on the nightstand, staring at it like it might crawl across the floor and bury itself in my chest. Part of me thought about throwing it away, smashing it, dropping it into a storm drain, and pretending none of this had ever happened. But it was too late. The damage was done, and deep inside, I knew that if I didn't find out what was on that drive, I would never sleep again. So, just after 6 a.m., I pulled the motel's cheap desk chair over, opened my laptop, not the second-hand one, the one I'd been using all along, and inserted the USB. There was a single folder, named ME. Inside were dozens of files, photos, videos, transcripts, and one document labeled, "Read this, first, text." I clicked it. It wasn't written like a journal or a confession. It was a letter. To me. You were never supposed to find the laptop. You were chosen because you're curious. Because you don't let things go. Because you lie awake at night wondering if the shadows on the wall are watching you. You think you're the first? You're not. But maybe you'll be the last. It depends on what you do next. The air seemed to shrink in the room as I scrolled down. My name was mentioned, repeatedly. Full name, correct spelling. My old address, my parents' house, my ex's name. A photo of me on vacation from years ago, smiling at a beach I barely remembered visiting. Another from the subway just a week ago. Someone had been documenting me for years, quietly, thoroughly. Then came the folders. One labeled Observation, filled with time-stamped videos from street cams, doorbell cameras, even what looked like footage from inside my own apartment. I didn't have a security camera. Another folder called Simulations, digital documents, scripts, diagrams mapping out my behavior, charts predicting what I would do if presented with certain moral choices, like choosing between saving someone I loved or stopping a stranger from being harmed. There was one entry dated the night I found the laptop. Subject entered Unit 117 at 1:48 a.m., bypassed trapdoor security threshold, triggered phase 3. I blinked. Phase 3? I scrolled further, breath caught in my throat, and found a set of files labeled contingencies. And among them, one titled Subject Termination. My photo was the cover. I snapped the laptop shut, heart hammering in my chest, lungs refusing to cooperate. I scrambled to unplug the USB and nearly knocked the entire thing off the desk. I wanted to leave, to run, to drive to the nearest police station and dump everything in their lap. But I hesitated, because another part of me, the sick part that still needed answers, still needed to know why, told me, if they knew this much already, they know what you're doing right now. That's when the motel room phone rang. I didn't answer. It rang again and again. And when I finally picked it up, the voice on the other end was distorted, scrambled by some filter, like metal grinding through static. "Don't run." That was all it said. And then the line went dead. I paced for nearly an hour, phone turned off, USB drive back in my pocket, staring out the blinds at the empty parking lot that now felt anything but empty. I had the creeping sense that everything I'd done, everything I'd discovered, had all been part of a setup, that the laptop wasn't abandoned, that it was planted. A trap. And I'd walked right into it. But why? What did they want? I considered going to the media, uploading everything, blowing the whole thing wide open, but I didn't know who they were, and if they had access to that much surveillance, to that level of psychological profiling, they'd erase me before the story ever reached anyone who could help. So I made a decision. I repacked my things, paid cash for gas, and drove 3 states away. I changed my number, deleted my social media, abandoned my old apartment, and started over under a different name. It wasn't enough to stay safe, but it made me harder to find. Still, sometimes I think about going back. Sometimes I wonder how deep the rabbit hole really goes. And once in a while, when I stay in cheap motels and open the nightstand drawer, I expect to find another USB waiting there for me. Because they didn't just want to scare me, they wanted to recruit me. And maybe, just maybe, they already have.